Hey guys, we're live. It's 5:04. It is Ways and Means Committee on Tuesday, June 21st. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that the press and public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Nicole, will you do roll call, please?
Councilmember Pierce.
Here.
Councilmember Myers. Here. Councilmember Popson. Councilmember Streetman.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Anderson. Here. Councilmember Bogosian.
Here.
Councilmember Han.
Here.
Mayor Pounds.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. First item is approval of previous meetings minutes from May 17th, 2022.
Motion to approve. Second.
Any edits, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Nicole, citizen comments?
I'm afraid to say yes or no.
Jimmy, you
No.
got something?
Okay, good.
A jacket there.
Yeah, the AC working.
Financial statements is one.
All right, so we are almost to the end of the city's fiscal year. We're in May. This is the 11th month. Good news to report. The revenues look good. General fund revenues are already 5% ahead of budget. And June is historically a very good month for the city revenue wise. There are a couple revenue streams that happen in June, which is SCE&G franchise fee, which is a 6-figure amount. Insurance license fees are another 6-figure amount. Local option sales tax will collect 3 months worth of local option sales tax before we finalize the June results. Because we will hold those, these revenues might be received in July and August, but we will accrue them back to June 3rd. So we're already 5% ahead, and we will certainly end up way better than by the end of the fiscal year. Expenditures are running behind budget. There are the things that we've talked about before. The biggest piece is the budget included almost $3 million for drainage phase 3. And that, as you all know, is the majority of those expenses will be spent in FY23. Digging in to general fund revenues, property taxes are at 100%. That they will, I'm forecasting that they will be over slightly, but nothing significant. The big players are business licenses, rental licenses, building permits, and parking. So those 4 revenue streams are already significantly ahead of budget and forecasted also significantly ahead of budget. So current forecast is that general fund, this is just the general fund revenues, are going to be $2.7 million ahead of the budget. Now, remember, the budget was deliberately very conservative because we did not know a year ago at budget time how the economy would recover, the island economy would recover from the pandemic. So keep that in mind when you're seeing these big gains to budget. On the expenditure side, again, in the general fund, these are the city's operating costs primarily. The target would be at 92% for the year, and we're at 85%. There are some expenses that hit in the final month. For instance, there are, just because of the way the calendar rolls, there will be 3 payrolls in June. Some other, again, we'll hold open payables into July and August. Anything with an invoice date that is June will be accrued. So, June should be a heavy expense month, but I still feel pretty comfortable that when all is said and done, we'll be about 3% under budget overall. So that's why the forecast here includes that $376,000 that I think will be under budget on the expenditure side. So bottom line is, we will have, the city will have a significant excess of revenues over expenditures in the general fund as of June 30. City council will direct the distribution of these funds as it always has in the past. In past years, council has directed these funds to increase either fund balances in the general fund, just hold some money in the general fund, let that fund balance go up, which makes sense as expenditures rise. You want to keep that kind of dynamic steady. The disaster recovery reserve fund has, past councils have transferred some money there. Y'all need to decide how big you want that fund to be. It is approaching $3 million now. And then historically, the balance has gone to the capital projects fund for future capital endeavors. And I know y'all heard me say this a million times. The only revenue source that the capital projects fund has is transfers in from the general. So we want to have some excess at the end of the fiscal year transfer to the capital projects fund, because that's how that fund stays healthy. So I've been talking about general fund all this time, but we also are experiencing significantly over budget revenue streams on accommodations and hospitality taxes. So 2.2 million or 62% ahead of this time last year. And I'm forecasting that year end will be 1.7 million ahead of the FY22 budget. That might be a little conservative given the most current accommodations numbers that we'll be talking about in a minute. Okay, cash position hasn't changed much. 31.5 million in cash deposits. 3.3 million is unspent bond proceeds. That's primarily for drainage. 1 million in unspent federal ARP funding, and 12 million restricted for either tourism expenditures or beach preservation. Any questions so far?
Going back to the projected, if you will, more revenues and expenses. I don't know what you're calling it these days. But then we had last year set aside $50,000 for lobbying efforts in Columbia out of that surplus, or net positive, whatever result.
Net positive result.
Well, it was, I like to ask
Positive
council to
net.
think about that if they want to continue with that.
Well,
Actually,
It's in the budget.
it's in the budget.
How much?
Professional service.
Same.
50? Okay,
It's
okay, thank you.
those increase from the sales tax or the tax, the local option sales tax and the tourism taxes. Is there a deadline to spend that? Like that has to be, we have to do something with that, right?
The local option sales tax revenue is a general fund revenue. There's no restriction on when that is spent. State accommodations tax revenue does have a 2-year spending window, so it does need to be spent within 2 years. But we've never had a problem with that because
It's never been an issue. If you spend what you get every year, you never have a problem. Everybody's
That's it.
always saying, oh, we're gonna have a big problem. It's never been a problem in all the years we've had it.
well,
Is that a higher increase than normal?
I can't say off the top of my head. It seems like, I
It
mean, just
sounds big
anecdotally, it
to me.
feels like. more than we've
What's your
had.
question higher, Katie? specifically?
The increase,
Yeah.
what is it, 70%, 64%? You know, that seems high. Seems like a lot.
Again, remember the budget
Budget
is.
was a lot now.
Right.
But we can dive right on into accommodations revenues. Municipal accommodations fee. So yesterday we received the check for May. And the amount to add to this chart. Yeah, so the new number for this is heads and beds in April is $186,478.
Jesus.
That's.
It's like having a rich
big
aunt,
month.
That's a record,
right?
Record for April.
record for any month, is it?
But because last year, you can look at, huge increase in FY 21. So the 47% increase from FY 21 didn't change, even with that big $186,000 addition. But compared to FY 90, we're at 91%, and then compared to FY 19, 68%.
Depends on what month Easter falls into. Sometimes it's in March, sometimes it's in April.
Okay, state aid tax, we have not received the final quarter, but based on the trend that we're seeing in municipal accommodations tax, I would expect it to be a very healthy quarter for June. And no activity on the pass-through amount from Charleston County either. So on this page, there's no new data. Hospitality tax.
Excuse me, is the county paying on a regular quarterly basis now?
Roughly, yes. I wouldn't say regular because I don't think it's the same. But we are getting it quarterly, whereas before we could just get it by hand.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So the hospitality tax, the new number to add there for May is 137,604. So hospitality tax is taking a big jump. There was one catch-up payment, like a late payment, so 2 payments from one establishment in the month, but that was only about $8,500. I did look at, Walgreens, all the different restaurants in Walgreens make up a huge chunk of hospitality tax, and they were up month over month, 45%. So it's just summer kicking in. Harris Teeter was up 50% from March to April. So it's just the
I know I ask this question every time almost, but to
We'd
get
be disappointed. if you didn't.
to be a breakdown of the increase in our ATAX dollars in hospitality for that matter, but due to the new hotel coming on as opposed to previous years not adding it, what did the impact the ATAX dollars have on
Well, it is a 50% on the hospitality, but
Plus you got inflation running at over 8%.
I don't know if that room rates have done, but I'm certain.
Well, not something to the Harris Teeter,
Mhm.
the prices.
To Sandy's point about the price increases.
Yeah, and half the restaurants in Wild Dunes are shut down because they don't have labor. Can't staff them.
it? My whole point is just getting apples to apples to understand what the impact over year.
There's
to
a lot
year
of things
is.
going on.
Probably I must not talking into it.
I also wanted to point out that the Islander 71 restaurant is not included in because they were not open in April. So we should see that establishment starting to participate in May. Bay Beach Preservation Fee, I'm going to skip because it's a mirror of the community A tax. Local option sales tax. This is 1 month. We get our accommodations tax for a month, 1 month earlier than we get the local option sales tax. So we're only have March sales reflected in these numbers. So I would expect next month to see a jump. But we're 17% ahead of the prior year in the local option sales. And again, this is the general fund revenue, as opposed to the accommodations and hospitality tax that are special revenue. Moving right along to the project worksheets. Drainage phase 3. We did start payments to Quality Enterprises. Pay apps 1 and 2 were processed in May, which is the first time we've had construction activity on the schedule for a while. And I know Desiree will speak more to that in a minute. Next is the marina. And this project is of course wrapping up. No new activity, no May activity on this project worksheet, so this looks the same as it did last week. And then legal expenses, I don't think there's been any significant change here. This is sorted top to bottom by total 2-year expenses. You can see significant decrease in FY 22 over FY 21. And that is all I have.
Other questions for Debbie? Move on to item 5, capital projects update. Desiree?
All right, we'll start with the phase 3 drainage. As you can see that I've been sending you all some progress pictures. Hopefully you're getting them. The work at 30th is almost complete on the golf course portion. They are working with the contractor, the Waldoons contractor that was hired to restore the golf course area is working currently there. After that work is complete, they will then move out of the island. As you all know, we've requested that the road work happens in August after school starts to try to minimize the impact of traffic in the season as much as possible. But that project is progressing pretty well. And again, we'll very soon hopefully see a huge improvement in just the way that our stormwater management happens in that area. So after 30th Avenue, we'll move on to 36th Avenue, and that road closure is expected to the end of the fall. On 41st Avenue, still kind of same place we were last month, waiting on final permits. However, we've been working with our grant writer and Thomas and Hutton on putting together a grant amendment for the Office of Resilience, the agency that granted the city $1.4 million for the construction of the 41st Avenue outfall project, to include the piping of that ditch from waterway to the end of to the outfall. So you'll see on in your agenda later on, you'll have a proposal from Thomas and Hutton for additional engineering work that needs to take place to get to that point, because until now, it was considered, that project was considered to remain an open ditch. So there's, again, additional work to be done that hopefully is council approves it today so that we can move along on that project. We're anxious to submit that grant amendment because there's a lot of money, but obviously a lot of people wanting to get their hands on it. So time is certainly of the essence. For the comprehensive drainage master plan, here you can see some of the work that's been completed and then next steps. The interesting thing, this week, they set up a meeting with a local resident that has had drainage issues in his property, and we've been working with them on that. And I think the meeting went really well, and this person has a lot of really interesting ideas and solutions. And one of the things that we're considering with Davis and Floyd is establishing a pilot program where they can help us establish what kind of solutions property owners could do in their own property, whether it's with new construction or significant repairs, to manage the additional volume of stormwater runoff that is generated by, again, a new construction or a rehab project. So that's going to be part of the recommendations that they bring forward to us and for council to consider to implement some policy changes to that end. We're still on track to be completed by the end of the year. We're also working with them and identifying projects to apply for the Rural Infrastructure Authority. They have $900 million for water and wastewater management projects, and we think that we are going to be well positioned to submit an application for what the next phase of our drainage master plan project will be. Next we have the underground utility conversion project, 21st and Palm. We've executed the construction agreement with Dominion Energy. That allows them to then prepare the encroachment permit with SCDOT. Because this all happens on state roads. And we're still on track to begin construction for fall and winter of this year. Two new projects that we've added, these are FY23 projects, so we're not there yet, but we're preparing for, as we will, what, in 7 more, 8, 9 days? So we've prepared the request for proposals for both the pickleball court construction and the rehabilitation of the 2 outdoor basketball courts at the rec. Both of them went out last week, and we're expecting the deadline for questions is June 29th. Proposals are due July 7th. Our goal is to get a contract approved by council by the end of July so that we can execute and then issue a notice to proceed. I know that Norma Jean has also personally delivered copies of the request for proposals to contractors that they worked with in the past. So we hope that we'll have good response from folks. So I hope that they sharpen their pencils. Is that the, so that we get good bids on that. All right, that's all I have.
Questions for Desiree on projects? Item 6, old business. We don't have any new business. I'd like to suspend the rules of order and cover item G first, since we have Kirby here to make a presentation.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're going to hit item G first, discussion and consideration of revised proposal from ATM for design, engineering, and permitting of public dock replacement and T-dock improvements. Again, this is a fiscal 23 budget item, but Kirby, you want to come and share whatever with us, please, sir?
Sure. Thank you.
And before we let Kirby. So just to provide some context, ATM is again, the project engineer and project manager of the dock rehabilitation project. Earlier this year, City Council approved a change order to ATM for the design and development of specifications and permitting of the improvements to the T-dock and the public dock. At that time, the projects as they were conceptualized were just repairs on both projects. As you all know, throughout the budgeting process, City Council decided and voted to pursue a more robust plan for the public dock at the marina, and then to make repairs to the T-dock at an amount not to exceed $400,000. So the scope of the project has changed since January until now, when council approved the 2 different projects. So that's why Kirby is here, because there's going to be significant more engineering that needs to be done for the public dock, because it's a full replacement, requires a full new permit from permitting agencies. And then there's going to be some changes related to the T-dock. So just for the record, y'all have considered a proposal earlier this year, but because again, the scope changed, this proposal and the work that we need them to do to get to a point where we're ready for construction will change. So hopefully that provides some context before Kirby presents his proposal. Is that it?
Can you hear me? Yeah, good. Afternoon, everybody. Desiree basically covered everything that I wanted to talk about, but I'll just try to give a little bit more detail. In earlier this year, was this February, we signed a change agreement with the city to do some more work on the T-dock and the public dock. And at that point in time, we were thinking that the public dock would really just be getting a minor facelift. If we would add an ADA gangway out there, we'd add a new little floating dock at the end, and that was pretty much it. Well, since that time, as Desiree alluded to, the project has morphed to where we're going to rip everything that's out there out, throw it away. It's aged, particularly the floating docks. They're well past their useful life, but the fixed pier also is very narrow, as you might know. It's 5 or 5.5 feet wide. So it's tough for folks to get down there, particularly difficult if we start considering that dock as a place for people to bring their kayaks down and watch. So Desiree and Douglas and I started talking about the wider dock option, which we presented to you earlier this spring. And that's where we understand council settled is y'all want to pursue a much wider, more robust, true public pier for folks to stroll up and down and get out there and experience the water, whether they bring a kayak or just go to walk and sit on a bench and get the breeze off the Intracoastal. So we're talking about a brand new 16-foot wide fixed pier going all the way out to the maximum limit on the Intracoastal, and then new floating dock, new kayak dock, and a new ADA gangway going down to that structure. So totally new scope of service there from what we originally contemplated. In addition to the physical changes, there are regulatory changes associated with this. As Desiree mentioned, that new wider dock pier that will have to go all the way out, brand new permit. So we have to start the permitting process over with Corps and OCRM. I've already spoken with both of the agencies. I don't think we will face any undue scrutiny other than maybe the need for that wide of a pier, but we have some strategies to overcome that. So new permit, new engineering design of the new pier going out, and we also are including utilities out there, limited lighting on the pier, spigots, a couple of hose spigots on the fixed pier and the floating dock to facilitate maintenance, pressure washing, things like that, and lighting down on the floating dock for safety more than anything else. No shore power or anything like that. So much different scope than what we contemplated previously. Another thing that you've probably seen in the proposal, if you've had a chance to look at it, is there's a need for this bigger, wider structure to get additional geotechnical engineering borings, soil borings, to facilitate the structural design of the pilings that will hold the pier up. There's really no available geotechnical borings in that area of the marina. We have some over on Morgan Creek. We have the historic design of the T-dock, but I don't have pile lengths. We don't have engineering calculations, and we don't have any geotechnical data for that pier. So we need to get another couple borings. We contacted a few geotechnical firms that we work with. In Charleston, we got 3 or 4 quotes, and we're going to partner with the lowest responsive bidder to get us that geotechnical data out there at that pier. It's kind of costly because they have to go put their equipment on a barge, get the soil boring over the water, which is why it costs more than doing a soil boring in the parking lot. So a little bit more complex, have to account for tides, get down there, put everything on the barge. So that's a specific line item in this new proposal to facilitate the design of this larger, newer public pier. I vetted that very closely with our structural guys in the office, and they were adamant, particularly because of the use of the proposed use of this pier as a public structure. We really need to have that data to facilitate that responsible engineering design. So that's in there. It's not insignificant, but that's an added cost that wasn't in the work that we had proposed previously. That's pretty much it on the public dock. On the T dock, or what we call the Intracoastal dock, we're contemplating a different scope of services there, similar to some work that we're doing right now for Charleston County out at Cooper River Marina. It's basically a major maintenance effort on the entire fixed pier. When we went out there late last year, earlier this year, to do our general condition assessment, we noticed some significant decay of the marine hardware that holds the pier together. Basically the carriage bolts, the nuts, everything holding that pier together, they're in really rough shape. Some of them have rusted away. They're just gone. Some of them are about to go. So a full scale replacement of those items, a partial scale replacement of selected timbers in that dock. We noticed some rotted timbers in selected location. So we need to put together a scope of services for a contractor to go out there and bid on the replacement of the hardware, replacement of selected timbers in certain areas, to bring that dock back up to snuff. Again, we're contemplating replacement of the decking out there, and we're going to look at a couple different options. Southern yellow pine decking, which is out there now, and then we'll look at maybe an alternate for Ipe decking to match the docks at the marina and on the new boardwalk that's being proposed for that area of the marina site to kind of tie the two together. We'll also look at doing the same type of aesthetic on the new public pier. So a little bit of change on both, a little bit of a change on the intracoastal dock. And you think about replacing nuts and bolts and timbers and things like that as being straightforward and easy, but I can tell you from doing the work that we're doing now for Charleston County Parks out of Cooper River Marina, it's imperative to have a very comprehensive and tight set of bidding documents for these contractors to go out there and do the work, specifications on replacement materials, things of that nature. It's all very important, and that's what we've outlined in this proposal. We've got we've talked to the agencies. There's not a substantial permitting requirement for that work. It's maintenance and repair. It requires a notification of both agencies, but it's not anything new. And then I will also mention on the T dock, we're going to replace all the utilities out on the dock. Y'all have seen all the power pedestals and things like that are broken and laying over. All those are going to be redone as part of this project as well. So it'll be a nice improvement to that dock to really maximize the useful life of that structure.
Well, what are we approving?
Yeah,
here?
so-
Because I see dollar amounts here in the fee summary, but we already, are these in addition to what we approved? Didn't we approve some?
Yeah, so
previously?
so what's in the budget, you can see on the line item in the agenda, 57.5
Right,
is that. So we're approving an additional 53,000 for the work that Kirby's outlined here. So we had 57.5 in the budget. This proposal is 110.5. So an additional 53.
and that's primarily due to the geotechnical borings that you have, that are needed, primarily.
I mean, that's
I mean, that's
42,000.
42 of it.
It's 42 of it right there. Yeah.
And you've gone out for, you're saying you did competitive bids and that you just feel that's the price.
That's
on
the
lowest
lowest.
bid? Yeah.
That's the lowest number I've got. They were all real close together within a couple $1,000, which tells us that it's the scope was fair, but
And then the other amount that's increased from the previous budget was, I guess, is the regulatory requirements based on the permitting requirements based on the expanded scope.
that's certainly part of it. And some monies have shifted in that previously we had a more robust design effort on the T dock, but that's been pulled back and gone away since we're just going to maintain that. But we have a more robust engineering now on the public dock, so that money kind of slides over from one dock to the other based on the selection that the council has made. And then, of course, the geotechnical is something new and additional. The regulatory requirements are new and additional, and that's kind of where we landed. And I'll say, and I think Desiree, today we're looking at the improvements to the T dock, what we're going to maintain with the new bolts and timbers and decking and things like that as being something that we'll get into right away. We'll advance that work right away, bid that out as soon as possible, likely this fall. That's the intention, and then go right to construction work with that. We know that the permitting for the public pier is going to take some time, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe even 12 months. So we're going to delay bidding that work out and doing the construction oversight on that until the appropriate time in the future. So that work's not completed.
If you're looking at the page 9 of 10 of the
Yeah.
ATM proposal, what we're requesting approval is for task 1, which is the work that needs to happen as part of to go through the permitting process. And that's a total of 110.5. We have 57.5 in the budget, which was part of what was approved in January. And then task number 2, which is related to the technical specifications for the improvements to the T-dock. We have budgeted an additional 400,000 for the work on the T-dock, so that 25,000 could come out of that 400,000. And for task 3, I would only request approval of the task 3.1, which is bidding support services for the T-dock. Bidding for the public dock and construction admin for the public dock won't happen until FY 24, which is when we would be ready for construction. So you're essentially approving today task 1 in its entirety, task 2, and task 3.1.
These are fixed amounts. They're not like, in other words, they're estimates, I assume, on the permitting. If it comes in less than that, is that, or is these fixed amounts?
No, that's a good question. All these are lump sum fees, so it's all in. We've assumed a limited amount of coordination with the agencies post submittal and post public notice. Just based on the conversations that I've had with the Corps, it's what we're looking at with the Corps on the public dock is pretty benign. Basically, if we don't go any farther out into the waterway, we're not really changing the use of it to be any more commercial than it was. It's going to be less. It's very straightforward with that agency. And with OCRM, their only stated concern was the width of the structure. We feel that we can get through that discussion with them during the pre-application meeting process and don't really anticipate any substantial public comment or opposition to this, certainly based on our last experience out there with what we did at the water sports dock, which was a lot more controversial. And we received really no public comments on that work. So.
I had one, just to verify, I'm looking at the aerial photograph of the work that you're going to be doing at the public dock.
Yes.
And you've got that observation pier now with covered seating / swings on it.
Yes.
And we have had difficulty with our ADA compliances in the past, and I'm just wondering, will those be ADA compliant? Will a wheelchair person be able to actually get down that observation dock with those swings and seats in the middle of the pier?
That's one of the things that we're going to look at right off the bat with Douglas in task 1 is to refine that conceptual plan that we've shown to really define what those big picture elements need to be. What swings do you want out there? Maybe it's benches, maybe it's a certain type of swing, looking at spatial constraints, things like that. That's task 1. That's the big picture plan. Do we really need 16 feet? Do we need 15? Do we need 18? We're going to look at those things in task 1. And then during the design process, yes, very careful contemplation of ADA is important and considered in this.
I mean, a structure in the middle of the pier is really could impede the movement of a wheelchair. So just keep
Sure.
that in mind, please. So we don't have to go back and explain to the public that it's not.
I can appreciate that, especially my mother's in a wheelchair, so I know where it comes from.
Other questions or Kirby, other thoughts?
And that's it. Desiree, I don't know. We had talked about in our discussions, approval of task 1 in its entirety, as you mentioned, task 2 to get things going on the T-dock as soon as possible, task 3.1 to bid that out. And then I don't know if we want to contemplate task 4.1, which is the construction phase services for the
T-dock.
for the T-dock as well, while tabling the bidding and construction for the public dock until that's ready.
Mhm. Yeah, you're right.
Other questions, clarity needed on what we're getting ready to vote on?
So what's the dollar amount we're asking for?
157 total, of which 57 is already in the budget.
So
Roughly 100.
roughly 100. Okay, thank you.
And we have 400,000 budgeted for the improvements to the T-dock, which we've talked about, obviously, without getting proposals or bids here, we just think that 400,000 is gonna be much, will exceed what we.
Yeah, it wasn't up to numbers, I recall.
Yeah. So we think that with the 400,000, we'll be able to cover this additional engineering cost. That was Bogo's, 400,000. So I think we'll feel pretty confident that it'll be enough to cover both the construction and
Okay,
and this.
thanks. Just want a number.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second,
Other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
aye.
Opposed? Kirby. Thank you as always.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right, we're back up on the agenda to items 7A through F are fiscal 23 items, but we're given supply chain and time to get things. We're just going to go ahead and get the process started on these particular items. So item A is consideration of purchase of a Polaris GM. It's a fiscal 23 budget item for the police department. See, it's being paid with state aid tax money of $18,000, and you have the bid in your packet.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item B is consideration of replacement of 3 patrol vehicles. Again, a fiscal 23 budget item, police department, capital projects, community aid tax, state aid tax, 135,000. You saw the bid in your packet.
Motion to approve.
Second,
Just for the record, this is state contract pricing and we are exempt from the procurement.
Questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item C is consideration of replacement of 2 pay stations at Front Beach. Again, a fiscal 23 budget item, payable by hospitality tax.
Motion to
36,000.
approve.
second,
Just another clarification. The quote that you have in your packets, it's for about $46,000. We actually have a lower quote for 24,000, so we'll be under budget there. I'll make sure to include that new proposal in your council packet for next week.
Questions?
What's this? I don't even know what this is. Can you tell me what it
Pay
is?
station.
You are,
State park.
pay stations.
For Front Beach,
State park.
it's a fancy way of saying
and
kiosk.
they need to be replaced because the other ones are not working.
Well, they're just they're old and we try to replace them every 7 or so years. They get a lot of use and the salt environment makes it very difficult to maintain. So our goal actually is to reduce the amount of kiosks that we have at Front Beach to keeping about 5 and moving and facilitating the text to park technology that a lot of people prefer. We still want to have some mechanism for people who don't have a smartphone to use the pay station. But yes, our goal is to once, we'll just keep 5 that we'll just replace as needed.
I think the original ones were used anyway.
Yes.
I think we got.
We bought them
Mount Pleasant
from
or something.
Mount Pleasant.
They did away with them, waterfront park, and we picked them up. So we got our money out of them.
Other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item D, consideration of purchase of 2 Ford F-150 truck replacements. Rebudgeted from fiscal 23. Again, you can see where it's budgeted in particular line items.
Motion to approve.
Second.
This is for fire.
So
Fire.
if you have an old channel. No,
I was getting mixed up on your letters there for a while. Yeah.
yes, your D, consideration of 1 F-250 replacement, which is a rebudget from FY 22. Those 2, the original of another version of the agenda, we had 2 F-150, but those have already been approved. The reason they're rebudgeted is because we're not going to get them before the end of this fiscal year. So that's been approved.
So we don't need to vote on that? Or
No, you're voting on.
Just
D.
one,
One.
sorry. Current item D, consideration of purchase of 1 F-250 replacement, rebudgeted fiscal 23.
Gotcha.
So a new motion. Thank you.
Motion to
There
approve.
is a
Or
motion.
wait,
Sorry.
Well, it was a bad agenda.
yeah.
About that.
Okay.
Can we withdraw the
Motion to-
Second.
Withdraw motion.
Withdraw the second.
Second. Thank you. Katie, you just made
Motion
motion to approve.
Approve the
Second.
Second one.
Questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item F. E we've done. Item F, consideration of proposal from Thomas and Hutton in the amount of $17,900 for additional design, engineering, and permitting for the 41st Avenue outfall project to extend piping of ditch along 41st. Recall, we're doing this to create additional parking there at closer to the marina, so we'll pipe that area. So again, you can see the fiscal 23 budget item and where that's being paid for.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. All right, item G, preliminary discussion of fiscal 22 positive net results and potential project expenditures to consider. Debbie touched on this some. These are those good conversations you like to have, but don't always get to have them. As Debbie mentioned earlier, a lot of prior years, we've moved money into capital projects or disaster recovery or wherever, left some in general fund over the years. So again, just real quick, think about the upcoming projects we have going on. So 41st drainage, redoing the waterway boulevard path, outdoor courts at the rec. We have the island-wide drainage project happening, master plan happening, which will obviously yield some type of future drainage projects that we'll need money for. We also have money in each of the next 3 or 5 years. I can remember for beach access paths to improve that. So again, at the end of the year, we're going to project to be about $31.5 million in reserves. So general fund to have just under 4 million. Capital projects have about 13 million, beach funds just under 6, and disaster recovery about 2.8. And that disaster recovery, we've had a fair amount of conversation about, you know, what's an appropriate number. That's about a quarter's worth of our general fund expenses, just to put it in context for you. If we had a major catastrophe, and how long might we need to dip into reserves? So, you know, there's not a magic number necessarily. A quarter's pretty decent start from a general fund standpoint. When you look at, you know, the charts on occupancy for our rental and how fast we bounced back from the COVID. I know from Hurricane Hugo, we were down probably 3-4 months before things started back up. So just wanted to have a general conversation, you know, the end of the fiscal years in a couple of weeks or a week. We won't close out fiscal 22 until probably October-ish by the time we have everything done. So this is not a today decision, but it was just worth a little bit of conversation around where your thinking may be on, do you have a desire to pump up fund balances just a little bit more? Are there other projects that we haven't talked about and don't have on the queue to make happen? There's something that you had burning that you wanted to bring to the table that we could do. To Jimmy's comment earlier about ATAX money, it hasn't been an issue, but we do have timeframes on this ARP money. We should be getting our second $1.2 million here in the next month or two, give or take. So we do have some time commitment on some of these funds, not all of them, but we are going to have a really nice surplus year. So I think we need to think a little bit about where we may want to spend. Scott?
I was going to say, I mean, you just gave us a pretty good laundry list. It might be helpful to have that laundry list kind of documented and maybe some quantifiables around.
Project.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty robust list. And if anything else comes to mind, maybe by the next meeting, we can go through that list and have it for reference. And if there's any other ideas, we can email Debbie or Desiree and add to that list. If that
Jimmy.
gets circulated. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Nope, sorry.
I'm good.
I'd just like council to consider a substantial contribution to disaster recovery fund. Now, this is something that, you know, some people bucket from year to year and they go, well, we can always transfer stuff. The main reason to me is like, it's a psychological thing for the residents, saying that we are committed to this fund and that we're going to make sure that y'all are going to be okay. And so even though we can pull it back out if we have to, or we can add to it if we have to, it's just a good PR piece in my mind to make a substantial contributions to that fund.
Jimmy, do you have, because I know you've got the historical view of this too, around a, you know, what's I mean, it's probably one of the higher balances we've had I'm guessing in quite some time. Would you have a target in your head? Because we think if we're at a quarter's worth of general fund expenses now, and for anybody else too, I'd love to hear your thoughts just
Well,
around a target.
Well, I've always heard that, you know, just as a family, just a mother and father, maybe two kids, and they want to have something put away in case somebody loses job or whatever. I've always heard a general rule of having 6 months in savings. You know, I don't know why the city wouldn't want to maybe consider that. 6 months.
Yeah.
So we can operate for 6 months. It's a lot different now than was Hugo. There's a lot more funds available to us and we get reimbursed quickly from FEMA and the other federal and state agencies. But I still would like to have, if it at 2.8 now, when I first got back on council in 2012, it was like 2. So, you know, in all those years, it's only increased to about 800,000. But I would like to, we'll just see what the final numbers
Yeah.
Debbie comes up with. But I'm thinking a substantial commitment, maybe as high as 20-25% of the surplus. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jan,
First, a question, the capital projects reserve fund, you said, some of that is already encumbered for projects. How much of it is not?
you go back to Debbie's reports,
Is it like 3 million? I mean, so it's like 10 million that's not encumbered. 3
probably,
million
I mean, there's 3.5 million that are unspent bond proceeds.
Okay,
So that's definitely committed. Millions, 1 million right now worth of the current ARP money that we've gotten. That's kind of pegged towards 41st and Waterway Path. So to
Okay.
kind of to Scott's point, I don't know if we'll have it ready for council next week, but projects that are already underway and the dollars that are sitting on
Yeah,
them.
maybe just arrange it earmark.
And then other ideas that have been floated either via residents or you guys or whomever, just we'll have that maybe next go around.
I mean, I'd like to see, and Jimmy, I'd like your opinion on this. Improvements of maybe some of the golf cart paths that people use to make them more use, so that we can get them off of the streets and on, out of the way of traffic.
We don't have
And
golf cart paths. So where you talking
Yeah, we
about?
can-
Well, I mean, you got
Well, the-
2. Yeah.
the
20th Avenue.
Yeah.
the
It needs to
informal
diesel
ones.
work. And the other golf cart path is private property.
Yeah.
We just have that curb cut
Right.
Okay,
that was just done, which people are really happy about.
I
So
mean,
much
those are the
safer.
only 2 paths.
There's only, there's
Yeah.
only,
that are out there.
okay.
there's only one real path that the city has installed and maintains, and that's on the non-ocean side of Palm from 20th to the vet's office.
That's the Jimmy Ward Superhighway.
And he's got his key out. It's getting dark. We gotta hurry.
And it is a little
Alright.
bumpy right now.
It is a little bumpy. I'm a little concerned.
Well, and I'm,
I'm
you know, I
concerned.
mean, those are nickels and dimes, quite honestly, in the grand scheme of things. And you know, there's a sidewalk on 21st that is horrible. And there's a good number, you may not even know there's a sidewalk on 21st, but it's a
Right,
good
it
number
is
of
bad shape.
elderly folks that are on that road that'd be a nice one to fix, but that's, again, that's nickels and dimes. Yeah, Scott.
The only other idea maybe, and I don't know what dollar specific, but I think our budgets historically have had sort of a maintenance percentage that we have, but we don't have sinking funds. And so we have to go out and borrow money on some of these items. You know, maybe there's some conversation to be had about for certain either facilities or what have you. We know we're gonna have deferred maintenance with a big pop of capital requirement down the road, that we set up some sinking funds for those projects that we absolutely know.
We've
about.
done that.
I thought the
1%,
1%,
1% of insured value.
but does that go
It
away
goes
at the end
away
of the
every
year?
Goes away at the end of the year.
It's not a
It's not a sinking fund.
accumulated fund.
We budget every year
We rebudget every year. Right,
based on the insured value of that.
right.
So this would be something more cumulative.
Right, so like, for example, if we know the dock's gotta be replaced in 20 years, we have a little sinking fund instead of having to go out and borrow for it.
You know, another thought, I mean, you're sitting in a building that
Needs a sinking
Needs a
fund.
new air conditioning,
are heaters. How about that? Yeah.
negative space heater.
We aesthetically took care of this room and we've got, you know, audio visual coming some point, but you know, it's just keeping up with it. It doesn't have a need to be redone, but there's gonna
It
come a
is,
time.
it's 32 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably worth a look from a structural standpoint to see what we're sitting on. Any other thoughts or ideas?
Just one thought too, that we'll want to talk to you all about. You all know that earlier this year, the city implemented wage adjustments based on a wage and compensation study, wanting to bring everybody to market. Since then, we're seeing inflation numbers pretty dramatically. We know that that's, certainly impactful for our folks. And just keeping in mind that while a lot of the adjustments that were made focused on public safety, police and fire, the adjustments that were done for employees in other departments, in its majority were capped at 3%. So if we're looking at a inflation rate of 8, 9, 10%, a lot of our folks are standing behind. So I think we did a really good work for about a year looking at bringing all of our folks up to market. But at the time, we had to make some decisions because of the budget, the numbers that we had budgeted and available to us. So one thing that I'll be coming to you all for requests is looking at some of those adjustments that were done earlier this year that are not really keeping in par with numbers today and what we're expecting at the end of the year in terms of inflation. So that's just something to think about too when we look at our positive net result at the end of the year and making some putting some money aside to address that for personnel.
So Scott, to your comment, we'll work on, again, this is probably an October decision from what do we do with the surplus, Jimmy, to your comment. So we'll work on some numbers and projects that are currently underway, projects that may be on a wish list somewhere and put some numbers around it so we can have a better conversation. Just wanted to see if there was anything burning that needed to come out tonight.
The only comment I'll make is, and I don't know if we've done a study, but we budgeted a 10% increase over this year's budget number in revenue. And I'm still concerned about a pullback and the impact that it would have on our revenue. So if you look over the next 2 years and you assume a 10% pullback, which is probably low considered what some people are saying, what that does to us and how our funds would be able to handle that, especially in an environment that you just talked about, where we've got increasing costs going on and a pullback in revenue. It's on my mind. And I certainly want to make sure we'd have funds balances to cover us in those situations and not go on a spending spree and in a good year.
No, that's
If I
fair.
could,
Go ahead, Jimmy.
comment about that, maybe ease your fears a little bit. As long as I've been involved, the city has been very conservative. They've been factual, and there was a reason when we came with certain projections and stuff, but we've always been conservative. We had during COVID in 20, we had a really rough time trying to figure out what was going to be real because no one had any idea. And we went very conservative and it turned out okay. So I have every confidence that with the team that we have, including everybody that's on council right now, that we'll come up with some good numbers that the public will have faith in us.
Yeah, and John, I'll tell you, I got some sleepless nights going on because it's like, when is the music going to stop at some point? And then what does that do? I mean, our budget's only 20 million, not a huge number. And any type of pullback is a decent number to some degree for what we do. You know, to Jimmy's point, I think we've been ultra conservative the last 2 years for good reason. And I think our fiscal 23 budget is, I wouldn't say ultra, but it's pretty conservative, based on growth and stuff. So I think we just keep an eye on it. And to Jimmy's point, I think we got good people around the post hole, and we just make sure we're doing the right things. And $30.5 million sitting in our reserves is a great number. Some of it's certainly spoken for already, but that's a good number.
Yeah, I'll never remember it being that close to it.
So I hear you,
It should be
John.
worse.
loud and clear. Other comments, questions? Item I, update on the marina lease assignment. No real update other than what council already knows. We're waiting to receive audited financial results, Costa Marina Holdings. for us to review. Hopeful we will have that information first part of next week. I don't know if in time for council, but that's kind of the next step, waiting on audited financials from the holding company. Questions, comments?
We will get a letter about that. We won't get the financials ourselves, right?
You're gonna get a audited balance sheet and the opinion letter of Dixon Hughes.
Okay.
Yeah. Last item, J, discussion of ATAX task force recommendations on the expenditure of the 30% state ATAX funds for tourism, promotion, and advertisement. We touched on this fairly briefly at our last Ways and Means meeting because the task force had just had their last meeting that morning. Wanted to spend a little bit more time on this topic today, and there's an attorney general opinion that's come out since we last met, so just to make sure everybody's up to speed on that. But again, would be remiss not to, Rusty, thank you for your leadership on the task force and herding folks to some recommendations in an agreed upon and early time frame. So thank you for doing that again. We appreciate that.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor, Chairman.
And then, so Rusty, if you want to kind of walk through y'all's, this was in the packet, but you've seen it before, but a little bit more detail to it.
I will, thank you. Yeah, last month, I basically just went over the 3 recommendations that the ATAX task force had come up with and didn't really give any real context behind that. So just really quickly wanted to go through what the task force came up with. And as all of you will recall, this task force was unanimously approved by council when it was put in place in February. So we got to work right away, basically. And we tried to have more than 1 meeting per month. And most times we were able to do that. That's why we were able to get through, I think, with our task a little bit quicker than the 6-month timeline we had. So with 6 meetings, and we dealt specifically with the 30% of the ATAX funds that have to go to marketing and advertising through a DMO or DMOs. That's all we dealt with. We didn't deal with any other part of the ATAX dollars, the other 65%. With that, our task force basically came up with 7 items regarding what does success look like. And I'll go into a little more detail in just a minute on those, but listing real quickly. Number 1 was more accountability. Number 2, local focus. Number 3, more flexibility in the use of the 30% ATAX dollars. Number 4, resident input on how funds are spent. Number 5, more collaboration with the city. Number 6, more off-season focus. And number 7, tourism management focus. And along with that, we looked at a number of things to consider in each one of those success areas. Under accountability, we talked about going forward with our DMO and asking for and insisting really on monthly/quarterly financial reporting from our DMO, have reports readily available online that so we can all see, and that ATAX task force, ATAX advisory committee could deal with as well. Establish and measure better performance metrics, develop a contract with the DMO detailing expectations and performance metrics, something that's been asked for in the past year or so. Financial reporting specific to Isle of Palms tourism promotion activities, which again was one of those areas that the ATAX advisory committee had a lot of discussion about last year. So we took that on as a task force too. And one of our takeaways is that we certainly need to follow up with that and insist that we have that in place going forward. And maybe even creating a staff position to dedicate to manage tourism and relationship with our DMO. So that was the areas of more accountability. Under local focus, develop Isle of Palms branding, Isle of Palms specific tourism advertisement, not only as part of Charleston Beach's campaign, but the city's share of tourism promotion and funding is significantly higher, Isle of Palms, than the other Charleston beaches. So we have a bigger, we put in more than the other beaches do. We're on par, I think, with Kiowa Island, and other than that, I mean, we're right there, heads and shoulders above the other beaches. Number 3, more flexibility in the use of the 30% ATAX. And this is one that would be more political in nature, but we would like to, as a city, and maybe working with some other beach municipalities and working through Columbia, trying to advocate for changes to state law that would provide greater flexibility on how to spend the 30% that currently must be allocated for tourism promotion and advertisement. And we would like to look at things like even the city advocating for a lower percentage than the current 30% for tourism promotion. The dollars are just so large. I mean, the pool has grown. I mean, because of the popularity of South Carolina, as a whole, and also certainly the beaches. Number 4, resident input on how funds are spent. Actively engage the Isle of Palms community in setting the vision and strategy for tourism promotion, something we definitely need to do more of and have them more engaged. More collaboration with the ATAX committee in defining success. I had a chance yesterday evening to look at the ATAX advisory committee meeting yesterday, and it looked like that was a very good meeting, long meeting, but they covered a lot of ground and it was a very positive outcome, I thought. Number 5, more collaboration with the city, ensure alignment between city and DMO to ensure tourism promotion strategy meets our city's vision, our mission, and our strategic plan priorities we have in place. Number 6, an off-season focus. Focus our tourism promotion during the shoulder season, spring, fall, winter, to increase tourism activity during those months instead of during the summer when island is already full. We don't need to bring more people in here during the summer. We know that they're coming. But what we would like to do maybe on the months that are not quite as busy is get, not necessarily more people, but have people come here and spend more, and so that would be a big focus too. A focus on that diversification of tourism activity and clientele during the off season, such as group sales, conferences, weddings during the shoulder seasons. And of course, a lot of that really would be, Wild Dune specific. And number 7, the tourism management focus, support tourism development while preserving and maintaining the residential quality of life that we all enjoy around here. And an interdisciplinary approach that includes tourism management and city planning and policy making. So that were our takeaways. That were some of our things to consider. And we would hope that we have more focus on that, not only as a council, but also that the ATAX advisory committee that we have in place too would help work some of these recommendations as well. So that led us to the 3 recommendations that I mentioned last month. Our takeaways and recommendations to council. Number 1, request more accountability, collaboration, and local focus from the Charleston Visitors Bureau, the city's existing direct marketing organization. Number 2, support the development of the new Isle of Palms Chamber of Commerce so they can act as an alternative direct marketing organization for the Isle of Palms in the future. Number 3, city council to advocate for changes to state law to lower the percentage of state ATAX monies that is mandated to be spent only on tourism advertisement and promotion. So that was our 3 major takeaways. So that is my presentation, Mr. Mayor. If we want to have any discussion about it or any follow-up, be happy to do that.
Fine presentation and that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. You're here.
Questions or comments? And Rusty, I would just say specific to number 3, I've had conversations with the municipal association as well as our lobbyists, just trying to ascertain interest on helping us coordinate forces across the state, if you will, around the reduction of the 30% for the uses or, whatever that may look like. Also, some preliminary conversations with our neighboring mayors just to see if they would be willing to join forces with us. If you look across municipalities of South Carolina, there's probably 18 to 20 that produce a large chunk of the ATAX money. So it wouldn't be a Herculean effort to try and get, 20-ish municipalities together and join forces and have a powerful voice to Columbia, to your point. So some of that work started a little very preliminary work and conversations around that particular topic. Other questions or comments or thoughts, Jimmy?
Motion to adjourn.
Let me check my agenda. We have no further business.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Record at 6:13.
There was a good report.
Yeah,